Welcome to Deal Shredders.
We are your hosts, David and Greg.
We are local Nashville investors, cash buyers, and real estate agents who love to analyze your deals.
Hey fellow listeners, thanks for tuning in. If you have not already, please check us out on Facebook, like us on Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or listen to us on Anchor or any other podcast means. We would love if you would leave us a review or some stars if you like what you hear. You listeners are what make our podcast grow, so please don't forget to tell your friends.
Welcome to episode 5 of Deal Shredders. Today we talk with Matt Anderson, the lead attorney from Toro Title. He is going to be discussing his house hacking, his sweet seller finance deals, and pitfalls for investors to look at from an attorney's point of view. You don't want to miss this one. Stay tuned.
Official.
We are officially live.
Deal Shredders. Let me share it.
Yeah, Deal Shredders.
Oh.
Matt.
What's up, Greg?
Good, buddy.
I guess I should share it too, shouldn't I?
If you want. No.
So it's interesting that you say that because on this post, I'm asking everybody to share it.
Yeah.
It's 2 clicks in 1 second.
Look, right there.
Yeah.
Live, so I'm going to share.
So I'll share it. You guys share it. Everybody needs to share it on their page. You don't have to say anything about it. We're waiting for some people to come on here. It looks like Matt Anderson has joined us. Matt, thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Is that like a little filter thing that just happened?
Whoa.
Interesting.
I have like a Christmas thing on me?
Snowflake.
That's okay.
We should have an intelligent conversation. So.
Cool.
Awesome, Matt. What's going on, man? Anything you getting into lately? Like, what's been going on that's crazy?
Well, it's a lot of stuff going on right now. I told Dave a little bit about this. We hired an attorney, basically taking over some of my workload.
Okay.
We hired a new closer.
Okay.
And, both the...
That's over at Toro Title, right?
Yeah, Toro Title.
Because you got an attorney at your law firm that you work for, and then Toro Title is separate.
People always ask me, like, about a title company. Tell me about a title company. Like, what is everybody's position? Like, when you hand a contract in, you never really know where it goes.
Well, it's not the same. I mean, different title companies run differently and have different staff. And, like larger title companies have different, more specified positions a lot of times. So at a smaller office like ours, you've got usually one person you're working with running the whole file that you're going to be in contact with.
Okay.
The main closer on your file.
So you have a closer, you have the attorney.
Right.
Is there like sometimes a manager that runs everyone?
Exactly. And then a lot of times you have, assistants that also help do inputs on the files. And
those are, I'm assuming, like the processors.
Right, exactly. And then sometimes you have title search outside of the office, but some companies have it inside the office.
Sure. Is there any, who's Toro use for that?
For our
title search?
We use a few different searches.
So there's, okay, so you don't.
Outside independent.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Not sure what happened.
All right, it's all good. Looks like we got some people coming on here. I got David hanging out over there.
Technical issues.
That should be good, right?
Hopefully it keeps working.
Right.
If not, we'll make.
Well, I wonder if we got some bandwidth. Anyway, man, thanks for coming on here. We're gonna talk soon to get this started. Got a few more people that are coming on here.
Sure.
You have got some really interesting seller financing deals I think we're going to get into.
Yeah, there's so many different interesting things on these that we might only really be able to dig in on one, but
sure,
they're interesting to me at least. So we'll see. Maybe people watching will think it's interesting too.
I mean, you have to know a lot about everything to be able to negotiate and go maneuver through some of those interesting facets that you guys have used on that.
Well, and I always like the way that Brandon Turner's always described it on the Bigger Pockets podcast, where it's you pick up these tools and, the more tools you have, the more skills you learn in real estate, the more you can do with a deal and the more deals you can do. So when you get to these deals where you can do a few different things with them, that's where you can really expand what you're able to do on the deal end.
Yeah. Well, I think we're about there. It looks like we're about there.
Fingers crossed.
All right.
I don't know what's going on.
We are just about to get started. We've got plenty of people waiting to hear about Matt's deal.
Cool.
So we are episode 6 of Deal Shatters. It was episode 5, right?
Episode 5.
Ooh. Start over.
Oh, no big deal.
Welcome to episode 5 of Deal Shredders. We have Matt Anderson, and I'm really excited to talk to him. He is a UT grad for law school.
Yeah.
He has just started Toro Title. How long now, Toro Title?
It's been about a year.
About a year, right? Okay.
Yeah, really been blowing and going for like 6 months.
So he services investors with their closings, and
Right.
also you have a law firm with Reed Leitner Law Group.
Yes.
So that's where you practice law. That's
Right.
an aside from real estate, but that focus is actually on real estate and construction.
Right. Primarily what I'm doing there is in construction. So.
So you're going to serve probably a lot of mutual friends that we have.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're your hosts. I'm Greg. We got David Morgan.
Yeah, hey guys, thanks for tuning in. It's a real pleasure to have you all with us tuning in. Hopefully today and listening, you all will hear a lot of great content from Matt Anderson. He's a wealth of knowledge. Before we get started too far, if they want to get in touch with you, Matt, what's the best way to get in touch with you as we start talking about ideas, concepts, law stuff? Is it Facebook, email?
Well, easiest, get to know me and we can text or call, but the simplest way is just matt@torotitle.com. Just shoot me an email.
Cool. Toro, T-O-R-O, title.com.
Correct.
Cool. So, Matt, tell us, how did you get started in real estate? Give us a brief synopsis of that, and then we'll jump into, we hear about this deal that you've been giving us a little bit of an idea on.
Yeah, so for me, from my mind, it goes back to, I was about 22, going into law school. I just blown a bunch of money in Vegas because I thought I was going to be a poker pro.
Wait,
is that a true story?
Oh, yeah, absolutely a true story. I played the World Series like the summer before I went to Vegas or went to law school, blew a bunch of money, very irresponsible. Then went to law school.
But it's not irresponsible if you would have won. Nobody would have been like, what are you doing?
That's what I thought. I was like, here's my shot. I was like in Rounders, the movie.
Yeah.
But it didn't play out the way the movie did. But anyway, so I went to law school, and I had no financial intelligence still at the time, or at least limited, and I didn't apply it because, expensive rent, maximized student loans, built up a bunch of debt, no real plan of how that was going to work out. And then met Taylor, my wife now, while I was in law school. And my third year of law school, she was like, I want to buy a house. And I'm thinking, what is going on? This is crazy. Like, I'm probably going to move to Nashville soon. We're going to move back to Nashville soon. So she finds this house that she really wants at an estate sale. And I won't dig too deep into the deal, but this is just kind of how I got started. And she said, Matt, you're going to negotiate this deal for me. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? She said, well, I know you're a great negotiator, or at least she thought I was, right? And so I negotiated it for her, and we bought it, moved in, fixed it. She retiled the bathroom. We redid the kitchen, painted the whole thing, all that. And we lived in it. And then when we sold it and moved to Nashville, we made a decent little profit. And so that one was, it was really eye-opening to me. And when I started digging into, studying about real estate, I just got hooked.
Yeah,
quick.
the bug bit, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
You make a little money, you're like, I think I could do this.
Yeah.
Cool. So then you move to Nashville, start practicing law,
Mm-hmm.
and that leads us to, you've been investing for how long now?
I guess that would have been, how long would that have been? I think around 5 or 6 years ago,
Okay.
if my math's right.
So doing some fix and flips, or what has been kind of your bread and butter that led you up to the deal that we're going to talk about?
Well, I started I'm really a student. I was in law school. I know how to study. I know how to dig deep on the stuff. And so I just started reading books, listening to podcasts. And so the first thing we did was house hacks like that. And we did another one, and, we're about to buy our 5th house hack. And that allowed us to.
So you live in all 5 of them? You've moved?
Well, that's not all we've done, but we've done
enough.
5 of them, and we will have done 5 in like 5 or 6 years.
Wow. There's a lot of people that would not want to move at the time.
It's
worth it, though.
Taylor's a very special woman.
She is. She brought you into it, and now she's like, we're going to keep doing this every year.
Yeah. Well, and people ask me all the time, it's like, how do you do all this stuff at the same time? And I was like, well, I don't. Taylor does more than half of it.
You're like, I just do the law stuff.
Exactly. So that got us into it. And then we just started doing, we started sending mail, figuring out marketing. Devin McClish was a big mentor. Mike Brady were big mentors of mine. helping me kind of figure this stuff out. And then we, just started doing different things. We did some flips. Found some deals under contract we thought we were going to flip and assigned them for a profit. We started doing some HPRs and different land deals where we made a profit off changing the land, some buy and holds, and then eventually this commercial deal we're going to talk about. So
Awesome. So you have a commercial deal we're going to talk about.
yeah.
All right, so real quick, tell us about what is the asset?
Yeah, so it's a 3-unit commercial building, retail, and the middle unit's vacant. It's been vacant since we got it. We bought it a couple of years ago. I think it was 2018.
Okay.
And so that's the building that we're talking about.
Okay, so a 3-unit strip mall, basically.
And it's pretty big. It's it's not quite 10,000 square feet, but it's pretty big. Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge difference from house hacking deals.
Yeah.
Like
we
house
did some
hacking, you're
deals
going,
in
you're
between.
like, we'll do a little tile, a little paint.
Right.
You walk into a 10,000 square foot
Right.
retail
Office
space.
basically, yeah.
You're like, okay, we can't just tile and paint this.
Right. And I didn't just like fall into that as my first deal. We've done about a dozen
So how did you find that?
before
What was the acquisition like on that deal?
Well, I didn't actually find it. My partner found it. But the way we ended up getting it basically is we went, I forget the restaurant name, somewhere in West Nashville, and we got drinks with the guy like probably 3 or 4 times.
The seller who?
Yeah, the seller 3 or 4 times over a month or two, and first just talking general, and then we inked it out and got it closed that way.
So there's some interesting things you've kind of hinted at with this deal. One of the things that I find most fascinating is the seller financing part of it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people hear that and they're like, how do I get into deals with very little money or no money, or if I don't have bankability? Like the bank won't lend me, hard money people won't lend to me, or whatever.
Sure.
A great option if you can find somebody who has a property with a lot of equity, they don't want to manage it anymore. They're willing to sell that asset off because they don't want to be on title, they don't want the liability.
Right.
But they'll create the note, they'll create the paper. So
Sure.
you bought this with seller financing, right?
Yeah. And that's one of the coolest things about this deal. And it really opened my eyes of what could be done with commercial, and scaling up, because I'd never done something this large before. But we showed up to the closing table and they wrote us a $10,000 check. And I was like, wow, that's pretty neat.
Right. So you kind of knew this guy, you met him a few times, you finally got the deal under contract.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about the contract that you can, about the terms and like how you got to where it was and how you got all put together on paper.
So, a lot about this deal was thinking ahead, what are we going to do and what can we do now to prep this to where it's easier on us, later down the road. So we were able to do a pretty sweet seller financing on this one. And basically it was just the seller carried a third of the purchase price for a few years. And we knew we were going to need the bank financing on this. And then we knew we were going to have to do some work and probably would want to, potentially refinance while the seller still carried their note. So what we did on that was I put a provision in there that the seller agreed to, where he agreed to subordinate his note to, for us to get the bank financing and for any sort of future financing we needed to improve the building or to refinance.
So for those that are listening, that's really important to note. No pun intended. But so subordinating a note. So when you record a mortgage against a property, there's first lien, second lien, third lien, and so on and so forth. It's basically the position at which people get paid. The only person that gets paid in front of your liens are the local property taxes.
Yeah,
taxes always get paid first.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always going to happen. But then after that, you can have a bank, in first lien, and then after that, somebody in second, third, so on and so forth.
What position was the seller in at that point?
So the seller was in second. So basically at closing, the bank came in and funded in first position, and then the seller carried in second position.
And then you said you put a provision where he would be a subordinate if you needed to come in and add extra financing even later, or is he just always locked in second kind of thing?
Well, yeah, we did. We put a provision in there, and we haven't really used that, but I wanted to have that in there just in case, for example, I knew the roof was awful, and I wasn't sure whether our first position bank was going to be willing to lend us on that. So things like that, or if we wanted to refinance while the seller was still there. I wanted to have that set up to where we could use that option.
Right.
So the seller was you were bringing 2/3, and the seller was holding back 1/3.
Exactly.
So the seller financing means like were you paying payments to the seller?
Yes, exactly. So
your 2/3 was basically your down payment,
right.
And then he carried back the rest as a note.
Exactly.
And that's even better for sellers because they don't have the big tax hit for selling the property in 1 year.
Well, there's that, and then I'm assuming the bank used y'all's seller financing as y'all's collateral for the down payment.
So they used the note.
So y'all basically came to the table, like you said, you got paid money, so you ended up being in a commercial deal with no money, none of your money involved.
Exactly. And we had reserves. It's not.
Sure.
It's not.
You have to have some.
It's not really a no money deal because you can't get into a deal with this without cash reserves, or you're crazy.
Right. But the bank's not going to lend you the 2/3 down payment, like not down payment. But
all right. So you locked it up. You got seller financing in the deal. You put your earnest money down. I'm assuming there was an inspection contingency.
Right.
And how long was your escrow period and your closing period? Like how long would you suggest holding a property under contract like that to make sure you do all your due diligence?
As long as you can, honestly. But but I think this one. So this one was a little unique because we had a good relationship with the seller, and I think we ended up locking it up around 60 to 90 days. I don't remember exactly. But one thing we were doing during that period is, we wanted to check. We knew the roof was terrible and it was going to be very expensive to replace. So we already knew that. We wanted to make sure there weren't any other big issues. But also we wanted to kind of get a better feel for what was going on with the tenants. Because this deal, I actually wish I would have brought a copy of it. One of the leases was literally one page, handwritten, and then it was marked out and initialed, and then marked out again and initialed. And so
did y'all
it's like an attorney's nightmare, right? So I had to study this one piece of paper and try to figure out what the heck was going on.
So did y'all give yourselves a right to go back and try to not renegotiate but reestablish terms with all the current tenants?
Well, that's exactly what we did because actually, just conveniently, these leases were both about to be coming due when we bought the property.
And the seller let you go in there, talk to the tenants, renegotiate your leases.
Exactly.
See, that's a relationship game right there. I did the same thing. To be able to have all that done before you close,
exactly,
instead of starting on that after, is all due with having the
because if stuff starts going south before you close,
exactly,
it's a lot easier to be like, I don't know about this.
And if you have a relationship like that with the seller, they're more to help you get through those hurdles.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and you have to. you want to have a relationship with somebody like that who's carrying a note anyways, because the relationship doesn't end at the closing table.
Right.
But that was another beautiful. There's a lot of cool things about this deal. And that was one because we were able to get both of the tenants to sign a new lease that I drafted myself. It wasn't one page. It had everything in there that I wanted in there. And we raised the rents on both units significantly. And all that was lined up before we closed.
And you can, now, if you do it that quickly, will the bank use that as income?
It depends on the bank. But ours looked at the leases.
Sometimes they're not, you need a seasoning period to be able to.
Yeah, but we already had leases in place, though, so we were able to show the bank, here's what they have been paying.
And this is what they're going to be paying.
And this is what they're going to be
for
paying.
A debt-to-income ratio coverage.
Exactly, because we already had it signed, signed agreement. They were, they were locked in place for the term. And so the really cool thing about that, too, is, we bought it. When we bought it, it was, about an 8 cap if you ran the numbers.
Sure.
But as soon as we closed and as soon as the leases changed, it became a 10 cap.
Right.
Right
just
off
like that. That's value added right there.
Yeah.
Just by updating paperwork.
Exactly. Because we went from $4,000 a month gross income to $5,000 a month in gross income, by changing the leases and adding a parking
and
license.
There's still a unit that's vacant.
Right.
At that point. So you're like,
so
we're at a 10 cap, cash flowing, and there's only more upside.
Unit. Right. Exactly.
All right, so you finally got this locked up. Now you have an inspection contingency, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
So what did that process look like? And is there anything that you found out that you had to renegotiate?
Well, we kind of skimped a little bit on inspection for what I would normally recommend somebody do, and that was just because we knew we had such a great deal.
Sure, you don't want to be
you're not trying to rock the boat. You're like, let's close this.
And you knew you had a fair deal, and sometimes it's not worth squeezing unless something comes up.
Exactly. Okay. And so, there were some things I would have recommended for other people to do normally, but we had so much cushion here and we had such a good setup already that we just wanted to get the deal to the finish line.
So, but you said before you had the roof, so your CapEx expenses coming out the gate were going to be pretty high.
Oh yeah.
So tell us about what you did to offset that cost.
Well, what we were able to do,
And how much was the roof?
it ended up costing, I think it was like $73,000.
Yeah.
Well, because
Pretty significant.
Was it a flat roof with like tar? And that's why.
Yeah, and keep in mind, this is one-story building, really big building. So it's a huge roof.
10,000 square
It's
feet.
flat commercial roof, TPO, and the other thing too is I think we weren't too far off. We had budgeted like $65,000 conservatively, and it ended up being even more because they had to replace like all the decking, and it was a really big job.
Gotcha.
So you said you got that done though, and got the bank to pay for it, and was that just because it was the debt to income ratio was so great, or what was the bank saying that like, yeah, we'll cover that, don't worry about the capital expenses, we'll roll that into the loan?
Yeah, well, what they did was we didn't have it rolled into the loan initially, but the bank had the appraisal done, and so they knew at closing they were really safe because of the amount of equity.
So a lot of it had to be to do with the appraisal.
Absolutely.
So probably the appraisal is one of the most important things.
For sure.
So usually when I have like a commercial multifamily, you want to make sure you order that appraisal immediately.
Right. And the bank took care of that leading up to the closing. They had their appraisal they wanted to use.
So they saw the value between the appraisal and the contract price, and they knew that they could cover the roof.
Exactly.
So how did you work that out?
They just agreed to modify their
original
loan
term
term
sheet.
So, and that's a cool thing is, some of these lenders will have provisions in there that allow them just to modify the loan. So in other words, it wasn't really a refinance. It was just they modified their loan to add this additional.
And they basically
amount
recast it, they changed their payments, and they just
Right.
added it in.
So is that
With
done?
the same rate, same
Right.
terms of the original loan. It's just a
Exactly.
modification to the original loan. It's not a
Was that done before closing?
No, it was not. So they modified it after closing.
So
they
y'all
agreed
you
to take care of
close, and then over the next
Did they
3 to
already
6
know
months,
about it before? Or was it like, hey, by the way, can you do this?
No, I don't think, they knew the roof was in bad shape and we planned to fix it, but they hadn't agreed to fund it at closing.
and then they saw how good a deal it was. I'm assuming you and your partner went back to them and kind of leaned on them to say like, hey guys, you'll have a great collateral position, like
Right.
tons of protection. This is cash flowing. Your debt coverage ratio is fantastic. We would like to not come out of pocket with this money.
Well, yeah, and keep in mind that money is all going to improve the building. So in
Right.
other words, it's going to improve their collateral.
And the cap rate and the
Right.
value of the property.
Right, and it's also going to make the tenants happy too. So I mean, it's really good. It was really a good thing for the bank because they still had plenty of equity room. The building was getting improved. The tenants were going to be happier.
Now, do you think you had any equity between what your loan to value is? Why would you not pull a line of credit or something instead of going back to modify the loan?
Well, that was the easiest thing for it was the easiest thing for us. We already had the relationship with that bank. They already had all the documents in place. And then the other thing is, we knew we might want to refinance again down the line, not too distant future.
Sure.
So we kind of wanted to just hold off on that and save that down the road for if we could really maximize the value.
Future
of this property.
appreciation, basically.
Yeah, well, and then I imagine if you're going and doing a line of credit on a property like that, now you're having to deal with another set of closings, and you're having to take care of
True costs.
the seller that's already in the second, and then putting a line of
Right.
credit either in third or
Very true.
subordinating him to
Good point.
third. So that would get a little tricky.
Well,
Very good
and
point.
also, we had that clause in there with the seller, but I didn't want to have to use that
For
if
sure.
we didn't have to.
It's a Hail Mary kind of thing.
Yeah, I didn't want to have to say to the seller, oh, by the way, we're putting all this money ahead of you now.
Right.
If we didn't have to do that. So that's another reason too is, I didn't have to mess with that at all.
All right, so cool. We got it locked up. Tell us, when you were analyzing the deal, what were your exit strategies and how does that play out?
Yeah, I mean, our primary idea was looking at this as a hold, but our thought process also, like a value add hold. Like we can get the tenant in there, we can raise the rents, we can fix the roof, we can do all these things to it, and then hold it and eventually refinance, pull some money back out, maybe put it into a different investment, and it's going to cash flow. An important thing for me was that I was going to cash flow day one. And so by raising those, having those leases signed at the closing table, we felt comfortable we're going to cash flow day one, right? So that was our game plan. And then our other thought process was, because where we are in the deal, especially after we raise the rents on the cap rate, if we have to sell this thing, we've got enough room where we maybe could sell this a little faster than the average commercial sale.
Yeah, because you can price a little under market. You make money, everybody.
Right.
Okay.
So then you said that there was some interesting things that kind of happened. Y'all had some title issues as well, though.
Yeah.
Which is,
what happened there?
by the way, is not a normal thing. Title issues should not happen, but if they do.
Yeah, and I won't name any names or anything like that. And no. it's all that, this was just one of those weird situations where, it was an odd thing that happened. But essentially, long story short, one way or the other, an easement was missed. And thankfully, we had multiple exit strategies so this property is actually more than one lot. So there was an easement on one of the lots that basically makes it where, unless something changes, nothing can really be built there anymore because of that easement. So somehow that was missed. It wasn't on the disclosures at closing. It was just completely missed. And
how'd you find out about it?
Well, I ended up looking back through the records, and
this is after closing, you're perusing legal documents as all good lawyers do in their spare time.
Yeah, well, something anybody would do.
And that's a good tip, because that's one thing. Like when I was buying my fourplexes, I asked for the title search results, and I looked through there too to make sure nothing was missed. So
yeah,
it's always, if you know what you're looking at or know somebody, they can actually look that over and make sure that doesn't happen.
Well, and actually, if I remember correctly, the way it played out, and it's been a little while, and I don't remember all the timeline, but I think the first thing that happened was I'd been in contact. Somebody contacted me with the person who owned the easement, and so I talked to them, and that was the first thing we heard about it. And then I was like, "Well, this doesn't make sense." I looked back over my documents. Hopefully we didn't miss
Nobody
this.
disclosed this.
Wasn't in there.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, what is going on here? Maybe they just forgot to record this, and so they don't, their easement's no good against me. So I went back, and lo and behold, there it was. I found it. And so they had just missed it. And so at that point, I initiated the title claim.
Okay, so you initiated the title claim because they missed it.
Yeah, they missed it. And so it was a defect, a defect or an encumbrance on our property,
which had to affect Shell's value.
So did they have to
we had insurance for.
So do they re-record the deed? What do they do? Because everybody knows about using title insurance, but I don't know anybody who's actually used it.
Yeah, you don't have to use it very often. Yeah, I mean, the main thing they did was...
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Knock on wood.
The main thing they did was they had us agree, like after they paid us for the claim, that now this was no longer covered. This was now accepted.
Yeah, it's exception on the policy.
Exactly. Which, if they would have known about it, if it would have been caught at the front end, they would have just put that in as an exception, and then we would have found out about it before closing.
And then you would end up negotiating with the seller based on whatever, if you're gone with it or if you want to at least move forward with it.
Right.
Because that's a game changer.
Yeah, I mean, because it gave us additional capital early on that we could use. And since we had multiple exit strategies, like the fact that that easement just didn't absolutely kill the deal, or what we could do with that property.
So how do you, when you file, I haven't filed a title claim before, how do you come to terms on what that value of that claim is based on whatever issue?
What's the going rate for these days?
Yeah. Like how does that even work out? Or you just kind of pick a number and then just go, let's just start there.
Well, I'm gonna use my first "it depends" on this one, and basically, it really does depend though, because it's going to be something that's very subjective, and you get into whether is this a speculative loss or is this like a real concrete loss you can show, and so that's a battle I knew I was going to have with the carrier, but at the end of the day, we weren't trying to fight this thing forever or battle this out in court if we didn't have to. And so we took, we anchored it. Here's what we think it's worth conservatively. Let's see if we can get this for it.
Cool. And then so y'all negotiated and found something y'all are happy with. And then at that point, it's just like any other insurance claim. They write you a check and you move forward.
Exactly.
Cool. So you close the deal. You got your leases raised. You've got the loan mod. What's the plan now?
Well, the other thing we did to make the gross income go up to 5,000, it was a little thing, but it helps a little bit, was the neighbor commercial building. They had been using our parking lot for years.
We charge them.
Yeah, and nobody was charging them. Nobody was saying anything about it. And so went over, knocked on the door, met them, became friends, and said, "It looks like y'all are using, our property, and just kind of made a relationship. And they wanted to continue to allow their clients to park there.
Oh, it was a commercial.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So we put a parking license agreement in place for a few years and said, okay, y'all keep doing what you're doing, but you need to pay us for it because you're using our property.
Right.
So that gave us.
So that takes away from your parking.
So that was an extra $350 a month just tacked on.
And that was, I'm assuming, after the fact, like y'all realized y'all had the asset for a little while.
So what made you even think to look?
Well, I just noticed that the people were parking there, but not going.
Walking across the street or something.
Yeah, not going in our building. I'm like, and then I talked to our tenant, and they said, yeah, they've been doing that. It's kind of annoying.
But that's something you probably realize because your background in law as a lawyer, like you see that and you're like, oh, that's infringing upon like our property rights.
Yeah, they don't have the right. They don't have the right to park on somebody else's property
for their business to get clients.
Yeah, just because it's convenient for them.
Right.
So.
Well, cool. Is there any other key factors you want to go over on this deal? I mean, this is a pretty.
Yeah, we got
intricate deal.
Seller financing with a subordinate.
Mm-hmm.
You got the loan mod.
Yeah, then the loan mod for the roof. You got money back at closing. You also had a title claim issue.
Yeah.
And then you renegotiated lease before you closed. And you also did a parking license after closing.
Mm-hmm.
And then now you're just sitting on it. Do you still have the unit vacant that y'all are planning to renovate and put a tenant in? Or
yeah, it's still vacant. So we're looking to plug in a tenant there.
Well, you tell us if you want to.
Yeah, sure. If anybody, it's a little bit of open space and office space as is right now, but you could revamp it, and I think it's about 3,500 square feet.
so if they want to reach out,
Yeah, reach out
at Toro Title, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Shoot him an email. He can get you the specifics on the property, location, rent, and all that fun stuff.
Just a little bit outside of Nashville, and it's, if you want a little bit of space and you want to pay below market value for that space, it's a good opportunity. So
You like below market value.
Yeah.
Always. Always. That's how we make money.
Well, cool. So, Matt, how can we get a hold of you?
But like I said, the easiest way is matt@torotitle.com.
Like you just said, you mean.
No, that's cool.
Cool, yeah. So, all right. Well, I'm going to wrap this up. Episode 6 with Matt. Or I wonder if there's any questions in the comments we should
Let's see. Share your knowledge. I'm anxiously waiting. No, it doesn't look like there are any questions.
All right. Well, then we're gonna hit
how do
that.
you introduce that subordinate structure? Had a deal die because the seller wouldn't take a second position? It's a great question.
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah, so the question, Devon Brooks, shout out to you, man. It's good to hear
Oh,
from
hey,
you.
Devon.
Hey, Devon, what's up, buddy?
How did you introduce that subordinate clause into the deal structure? He had a deal die because the seller wouldn't take a second position.
That's a really good
It's a
question.
great
Sure.
question.
So how do you
Well,
so just to explain, so basically you're kind of wanting the seller to take
Second
second
position.
position, meaning that
Right.
if he defaults, that seller may not get paid. So how did you?
Yeah. Well, I would say probably one of the biggest keys is to be thinking ahead. Like from my perspective, the sooner that you understand you're going to need that, the better it is, because you don't want to throw that on the seller last
Like,
minute.
oh, by the way, we're going to
Right.
close tomorrow. Can
Yeah.
you sign this paper?
Yeah, and a lot of this stuff is all about framing, because I think the way we approached it with the seller, if I remember correctly, was like, look, we don't have all the money to pay you just cash for the rest of
And
this.
it doesn't make
We're gonna
sense to
use a
even do
bank.
that, right?
Right, and most sellers understand that's how you normally buy property. And I've said our banker, unfortunately, is going to require that they be first. Now, don't worry, we're going to pay you on time. We're going to pay you on time every month when the balloons due. We're going to pay you your money. It's just the bank needs to be in first position.
Isn't that because the banks has more money to lend though? They're lending more money on the
Right.
deal, so they
Right.
would. You would almost think that's like, look, they're lending $300,000 to the deal, and you're lending me $50,000. So obviously,
Yeah.
it just makes sense for them to be in first position.
Well, and the other thing too is it's going to be different depending on the situation. If the property is worth $500,000 and you've got a $400,000 loan from a bank and a $200,000 note from the seller, well, the seller's not really in a good spot there, right? You know, if anything were to happen. So that was another aspect to it.
So how did you sell the seller on the idea, though, that like you're not bringing any of your money to the table?
Well, I don't know whether that was ever brought up or not.
Okay.
To be honest with you.
It doesn't matter.
Basically, well, but what I mean is like if you're trying to sell a seller on a, hey, you're gonna be in second position, if they're doing the math on it, they might realize like, so the bank's lending this money and then I'm taking the second, and this is the purchase price, and those two numbers together are the purchase price.
Well, I mean, it's like a way of leveraging to be able to do all these season the units.
For sure, I completely agree. It's just I wonder having like there's some people that would be like, yeah, no big deal, but there's some people in Nashville, and we've all talked to them. They're like, no, you're gonna give me my money, and you're gonna get. I want $300,000 for a property that's worth $100,000,
Well,
or whatever. But it's like they want it their way regardless, and they're not reasonable. It sounded like you had a very reasonable seller.
Yeah, he was a very reasonable guy. He'd owned the property for forever, and owned a bunch of other properties. So he's not somebody who was trying to squeeze every penny or nitpick. As long as he felt comfortable that he was going to get his price and he was going to get paid on time.
A good question to ask is like, so I mean, when I buy this property from you, do you plan on buying something right away? I mean, figuring out that they may not.
Yeah, what's their motivation?
Yeah,
for sure.
Because you can tell them, it's like, look, I'll give you X 20% now in payments. Instead of you paying all of this in taxes, you're going to save on that taxes.
Well,
because you're only going to get taxed on your down payment that I'm giving you. And then you get cash flow for the note.
Well, and maybe not even on the down payment, because, I mean, I don't know what his basis was.
Very true.
But he may not have made any profit until the payments. So
until the loan matures.
Yeah. He may use that down payment to pay off a note.
Right.
But ultimately, was he just a tired landlord that was like, I don't want to deal with tenant issues anymore. I don't really want to be on title. I just
pretty much. I think he'd had some life, stuff come up, and then he'd owned all these properties for so long. He was just kind of slowly trying to get out.
Yeah.
And so that was his main. I think his main priority is build a relationship with somebody, give the property to somebody he liked, to get out with a decent profit and move on. And he wasn't. People have different motivations.
For
right?
sure.
Not everybody is all about price or all about maximizing profit.
And it's like making it work for everybody, too.
Right. It was a win-win for everybody. Yeah.
cool. Let's see. What are the questions?
Devon, does that answer your question, buddy?
I'm sure it does.
Okay.
Hopefully it does. Next time we need a
text me
roofer,
later,
call. Okay. I think that's it. No
That's
more
it.
questions.
No more questions. Well, guess what? We need to hit that end live video button and say goodbye. And go ahead and share this on your page. Deal Shredders episode 5 with Matt Anderson.
Cool.
Thank y'all for
Thanks
having
for
me.
tuning in, guys. Love it.